At the private aviation terminal of Aspen-Pitkin County Airport, snow was falling gently, flake by flake. Dr. Maya Sterling stood at the edge of the hangar, watching the ground crew prepare the Gulfstream G650 aircraft. At 36, Maya had transformed Biogen Innovations from a dorm room startup into a $4.2 billion pharmaceutical empire. She had achieved this through her intelligence, relentless work ethic, and ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. The Gulfstream was one of 3 aircraft in the private fleet managed under contract by Apex Aviation Group. Maya was flying under a secret identity today. She was deliberately dressed plainly, a worn, puffy black North Face parka, faded jeans, scuffed Timberland boots, and a wool beanie covering her natural curls. No makeup, no jewelry except for a simple watch her father had given her before he died. She carried a worn duffel bag instead of a designer suitcase. In the end, she had arrived in an overly simple manner. Maya wanted to see how Apex's crew treated passengers when they thought no one important was watching. Because she had heard some rumors. There were complaints about the crew's prejudiced attitude toward passengers and their lack of respect. That's why today Dr. M. Sterling would be on the passenger list, no title whatsoever. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she watched a man disembark from the plane. According to the crew list, this person was Captain Ryan Foster. He was tall, with silver hair, and had a stern military bearing that suggested he believed in absolute authority throughout his career. Foster descended the stairs and scanned the tarmac like a general inspecting his troops. His eyes fell on Maya standing at the hangar entrance, and his expression suddenly changed. He instantly shifted from neutral professionalism to palpable irritation. He walked toward her and called out in a sharp tone, "Excuse me," Foster asked. "Are you from the catering company?" Maya turned to him, keeping her expression neutral. "I don't understand," she replied. Foster made a dismissive gesture toward the terminal. "The catering delivery should have been completed an hour ago," he said. "You need to coordinate with the FBO staff. You shouldn't be wandering around the ramp. This is a restricted area." Maya raised her eyebrows. "I'm not from the catering company, Captain," she said. Captain Foster looked her up and down. He paused slowly and carefully on her worn clothes and scuffed boots. "Then what are you doing here? Are you ground crew?" he asked. Maya said calmly and politely, "I'm a passenger." Foster's expression shifted from irritation to suspicion. He pulled a tablet from under his arm and scrolled through the passenger list. "M. Sterling?" "Correct," Maya replied. He looked at her again, then at the tablet, then back at her. The calculation in his eyes was clear. This woman didn't look like she belonged on a $65 million private jet. In fact, Captain Foster had already begun to discriminate. "Are you Dr. Sterling's assistant?" Foster asked, his tone making it clear he didn't even think that was possible. "I am Dr. Sterling," Maya replied quietly. Foster let out a short, sharp laugh. "Sure, I'm the Pope." He gestured toward the terminal. "Look, whoever you are, I don't have time to play games. The real passengers will be here in 20 minutes, and this plane needs to be ready. If you're here for cleaning or supplies, talk to the ground crew," he finished, speaking in an even more condescending tone. This wasn't new to Maya. It had never been new, just the endless exhaustion of being rejected because of her appearance. But she kept her voice calm. "Captain Foster, I'm telling you I'm Dr. Maya Sterling. My name is on the passenger list. I'd appreciate it if you'd double-check." Foster's face darkened. "Don't tell me how to do my job. I've been flying private jets for 15 years. I know who can and can't board my plane." He leaned in and lowered his voice. "Between us, we've been having problems lately with people trying to sneak onto the plane, Instagram influencers wanting to take pictures, staff wanting a free ride. So, unless you have documentation proving your authority to be here, I suggest you leave before I call airport security." Maya reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. She opened her email and showed him the confirmation. "Passenger M. Sterling, Gulfstream G650 N7Ms, Aspen to Teterboro, December 24th, departure at 2 p.m. Foster looked at the screen, his jaw tightening. "Anyone can send a fake email. Show me your ID," he said, making things more difficult. Maya pulled out her driver's license and handed it to him. He scrutinized it, squinting, clearly hoping to find some inconsistency. Finding nothing, the skepticism in his expression gave way to a more unpleasant feeling. That feeling was definitely anger. "Fine," he said curtly, and returned the license, "but I'm putting you in the back seat. The main cabin is reserved for business partners who have real work to do during the flight. You can come too, but don't get in anyone's way." Maya narrowed her eyes. "My seat on the passenger list is 3A, she replied. Foster snapped, "The passenger list is wrong. I arranged the seats according to passenger priority, and right now you are the lowest priority passenger on this flight." Maya was now absolutely certain she was being discriminated against. He turned and walked toward the plane, clearly expecting Maya to obediently follow him. Maya paused for a moment to watch him go, her mind already calculating her next move. She could reveal who she was right now. She could put an end to this humiliation immediately. But a voice inside her wanted to see how far Foster would take this, how he would treat someone he perceived as powerless. Maya took out her phone and sent an encrypted message to James Caldwell, CEO of Apex Aviation Group. I will be making a secret flight today with N7MS. Observe and report. Do not intervene until landing. The reply came within seconds. Understood. Recording all communications. Good luck, Dr. Sterling. Maya slung her gym bag over her shoulder and walked down the runway toward her own plane, prepared to be treated like an uninvited guest in her own home. But when she stepped off the air stairs and into the cabin, she was met with cold indifference. Flight attendant Lisa looked up from arranging champagne glasses. She was young, perhaps 24, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and a tense eagerness on her face. Lisa said, "Oh," with a surprised look. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but passengers aren't allowed on the plane yet." Maya interrupted Lisa politely and courteously at that moment. "Captain M. Sterling told me to board the plane," she replied. Lisa's eyes widened slightly. She looked toward the cockpit, then turned back to Maya. "Of course. Allow me to take your bag," she said. Maya held her bag tightly and replied politely, "No thank you, I'll keep it with me." Lisa said tensely, "Captain Foster prefers all carry-on luggage to be stored in the cargo hold. He says it preserves the cabin's aesthetics." Maya looked around the cabin, designed to her own specifications, and paid for with her own money. In a tone that would never invite argument, she said, "I'll keep my bag with me." Maya looked around the cabin designed to her specifications, paid for with her own money. "I will keep my bag with me," she repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. In fact, Maya was aware of everything, but chose not to speak up. Lisa hesitated, clearly torn between following orders and avoiding conflict. Finally, she nodded. "Of course, ma'am. Shall I show you to your seat?" she asked. "Seat 3A, is that right?" Lisa's face paled. "Actually, Captain Foster told me you'd be more comfortable in the back seat. It's quieter," and Maya cut her off, and standing firm, said, "I reserved seat 3A. I will be sitting there." Before Lisa could respond, Foster emerged from the cockpit. He had removed his uniform jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "Is there a problem?" he asked, though his tone clearly indicated he already knew the answer. Lisa said quietly, "Miss Sterling wants to sit in 3A. Foster's jaw tightened. "Miss Sterling needs to understand how things work on my plane. The front cabin is for the real passengers, the ones who actually do the work. Support staff and escorts sit in the back." Maya's voice suddenly took on a dangerous calmness. "I'm not support staff," she said. "I'm a passenger with an assigned seat," she continued. Foster corrected her. "You are a passenger I've graciously accepted on this flight. And if you want to stay on this plane, you will sit where I tell you to." Maya felt the weight of the moment. Every instinct screamed at her to end this charade, to tell Foster exactly who she was, but she wanted to see how far he would go. She needed to see how he would treat someone he perceived as weak, so she chose to calm down a little, and said in a quiet, calm voice, "Show me the jump seat." A smug satisfaction appeared on Foster's face. "Lisa, put her in the back, and make sure she understands she mustn't disturb the other passengers during the flight." As Maya followed Lisa toward the back of the cabin, she saw Foster's reflection in the polished wood panels. He was smiling, a cold, superior smile, as if he had won a victory. He was unaware that he had just signed his own dismissal papers. The jump seat was located in a small recess next to the galley. It was a foldable seat designed for flight attendants during taxiing and landing, not for passenger comfort. It faced backward, had very little padding, and no window view. Maya sat down, placing her bag at her feet, and watched as Lisa nervously fastened her seatbelt. "I'm sorry about this," Lisa whispered. "Captain Foster is very particular about cabin arrangements." "I see," Maya replied and asked, "How long have you been working for Apex Aviation?" Lisa looked at Maya and said, "This is my first private flight season, and I've been here for 6 months. Then looking at the cockpit, she said, "Captain Foster says I need to learn to read the passengers. He says I need to understand who's important and who's not." Maya asked for a little more information. "So how do you determine who's important?" Lisa looked uncomfortable. "Well, you know, their style of dress, their demeanor, whether they're used to luxury. Captain Foster says you can always tell who belongs in first class." What Maya had actually guessed, even sensed from the beginning, was about to come to light. Looking at Lisa, she said, "I see," and asked, "But what if you're wrong?" Lisa smiled nervously. "Captain Foster says that will never happen. He says truly wealthy people always reveal their status in some way. Expensive watches, designer luggage, their way of speaking. He says poor people who try to act rich always give themselves away," she replied. Maya looked at her worn-out boots, her scuffed gym bag, her plain clothes. By Foster's standards, she was invisible, disposable, not worthy of respect. "Thanks for being honest, Lisa," Maya said. "I appreciate that." 20 minutes later, the other passengers arrived, and the cabin's atmosphere changed instantly. Richard Cole and Thomas Webb were exactly what Foster had been expecting. Two men in their early 50s, wearing expensive suits and Rolex watches, carrying monogrammed leather briefcases. They were pharmaceutical executives from a rival company, and Maya had agreed to fly them to New York as part of a potential partnership discussion. Foster greeted them on the air stairs with a warm and respectful smile that Maya had never seen before. "Gentlemen, welcome aboard. I'm Captain Ryan Foster, your pilot for today. The weather is perfect, and I'll get you to your destination in comfort and style," he said, clearly showing the distinction he made between people. "Great," said Richard, patting Foster on the shoulder. "Nothing beats private aviation. It's much better than commercial flying." "Absolutely, sir. Lisa will serve you champagne, and we'll be taking off in 15 minutes. As Richard and Thomas entered the cabin, Lisa immediately appeared with a silver tray carrying crystal champagne glasses. "Welcome, gentlemen. May I offer you some champagne?" she asked. "That's exactly what I meant," said Thomas, smiling as he took a glass. Finally, proper service. Maya watched from her seat in the back, unaware of the glamour unfolding in the main cabin. She saw Foster mingling with the executives, Lisa laughing at their jokes, the entire crew transformed by wealth and status. Foster glanced toward the galley and noticed Maya watching. His face hardened. He approached her and whispered something. "Webb are conducting important business and don't want their attention distracted." "Understood, Captain," Maya said calmly. "And if they ask who you are, say you're from the support crew. Don't go into details." Maya tilted her head slightly. "Why would I do that?" she asked. Foster leaned in and his voice became a harsh whisper. "Because I'm trying to maintain a certain atmosphere on this flight. These men expect perfection. They expect to be surrounded by people of a certain caliber. And frankly, you don't fit that image." Maya met his gaze. "What image is that, Captain?" she asked, wanting him to lay bare all his feelings and emotions. Foster's jaw tightened. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean. Now stay here, be quiet, and we won't have any problems," he said, turning and walking back to the main cabin. Richard and Thomas had already settled into seats 3A and 3B, the luxurious leather seats where Maya was supposed to sit. As the engines started, Maya pulled out her phone one last time before the signal disappeared. She opened a secure app and began recording everything. Foster's comments, Lisa's explanation of her training, the different treatment passengers received based on their appearance. The evidence was piling up. And when they landed in New York, Captain Ryan Foster would learn the most expensive lesson of his life, though he wasn't even aware of it yet. The Gulf Stream ascended smoothly into the Colorado sky, and Maya sat in her jump seat, watching the clouds pass by the galley window. She wasn't angry anymore, she was calculating. And in 4 hours, the reckoning would begin. At 41,000 feet, the Gulfstream G650 sliced through the clear air above the Rocky Mountains. In the main cabin, Richard Cole and Thomas Webb were settled into their leather seats, with the ease of men accustomed to luxury. Champagne flowed freely, and Lisa moved around them, paying close attention to their every move. Maya remained hidden in the jump seat next to the galley. From where she was, she could see everything happening in the main cabin, but no one could see her unless they specifically looked back. Maya watched everything that was happening. She listened, and she took notes. Richard was talking, gesturing broadly with his champagne glass. "That's why I told the board that if we don't buy Biogen's patent portfolio within the next 6 months, we'll be struggling to catch up for the next 10 years. That woman Sterling holds some of the most promising compounds." Maya's eyebrows rose slightly. Unaware she was 15 meters away, they were talking about her and her company. "Maya Sterling," said Thomas, shaking his head. "I've never met her personally. She's very secretive, doesn't attend conferences, doesn't play the networking game, just sits in her lab and makes money." Richard stated plainly, "That's why we either partner with her or eliminate her. There's no middle ground with someone so intelligent and mysterious." Foster exited the cockpit after setting the autopilot. "Everything to your satisfaction, gentlemen?" he asked. Richard raised his glass. "Perfect, Captain," he said. "That's how private aviation should be. No crying babies, no economy-class passengers filling the aisles, just civilized travel for civilized people." Foster smiled. "That's my philosophy exactly, sir. I've always believed in maintaining certain standards. Not everyone belongs in premium environments." Thomas laughed. "Amen. By the way, who's the woman in the back? Your flight attendant said she was support staff?" he asked. Maya tensed, waiting anxiously to see how Foster would describe her. Foster glanced toward the galley, a dismissive look on his face. Just an escort, a friend of a friend. I wanted to leave her behind, but she had documentation showing she needed to be on this flight. I put her in the jump seat so she wouldn't disturb you, he replied. Richard nodded in agreement. A wise decision, he said. I hate it when airlines try to mix classes. Everyone should stay in their place. I completely agree, Foster replied. Actually, I was reading an article about how private aviation needs to preserve its exclusivity. When you start letting everyone on the plane, you lose what makes it special. The conversation continued and became increasingly aggressive as the champagne ran out. Maya listened to it all, secretly recording every word on her tablet via the cabin intercom system, a feature she had installed for quality control purposes and which Foster had apparently forgotten about. During the first hour of the flight, Lisa approached Maya with a small tray. Miss Sterling, can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Water would be nice, thank you, Maya said quietly. Lisa filled a glass with water from a plastic bottle, not the Fiji water served to Richard and Thomas, and handed it to her. I'm sorry about the seat situation. If it were up to me, it's not your fault, Lisa, Maya said gently. You're just following orders. I understand. Lisa hesitated, then lowered her voice. Between us, Captain Foster can be difficult sometimes, especially with passengers he doesn't consider VIPs. I've seen him like this before, judging people by their appearance and treating them badly. I always thought it was wrong, but he's the captain. What he says goes, she said. Not always, Maya said quietly. Before Lisa could respond, there was a loud crash from the main cabin. One of the champagne bottles had fallen and shattered on the floor, glass and liquid splattering onto the special Brazilian rosewood. Oops, Thomas laughed. Sorry, honey. Will you clean that up? Lisa rushed over with a towel and dustpan, kneeling to gather the glass, while Richard and Thomas continued their conversation as if she weren't there. Maya watched, clenching her jaw. This plane, her plane, was being used like a student dormitory. Foster, who was very concerned about making the cabin messy with his dirty bag, said nothing as the executives poured champagne and scattered glass fragments on the special wood paneling. Then Richard did something that made Maya's blood run cold. He took out a cigar. Would it be a problem if I smoked, Captain? He asked, already starting to unwrap the cohiba. Every muscle in Maya's body tensed. Smoking on private jets was prohibited by FAA regulations. More importantly, it was a safety hazard and would permanently damage the cabin interior, the silk wall paneling, the leather seats, the air filtration system. A single cigar could cost tens of thousands of dollars in repairs. Foster hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Technically, sir, FAA regulations prohibit smoking on board. But, he looked at Thomas and calculated, I suppose if we're careful and you're willing to take the risk, I won't report it. Richard grinned. That's what I wanted to hear. Flexibility. He lit the cigar, and sharp smoke began to fill the cabin. Maya stood up. Lisa, still cleaning the glass on the floor, looked up with wide, horrified eyes. She shook her head slightly, silently begging Maya not to cause a scene. But Maya had seen enough. She walked toward the main cabin. Excuse me, she said, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. You need to put it out. Right now. Richard looked up in surprise. Thomas laughed. Who are you? Put out the cigar, Maya repeated. Smoking on this plane violates federal aviation regulations and will cause permanent damage to the interior. Richard took a long, deliberate breath and blew the smoke in Maya's direction. Sweetheart, I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private conversation between some very important people. Why don't you go back to your little seat and leave things to the grown-ups? Foster emerged from the cockpit, his face dark with anger. What are you doing here? I told you to stay in the back. I want your passengers to comply with FAA regulations, Maya said calmly. Smoking is prohibited. Mr. Cole is a valued customer, Foster retorted. And as captain, I have the authority to make decisions about cabin policies. You have the authority to make decisions within the limits of federal law, Maya corrected. Smoking on this aircraft is illegal. Each violation carries a fine of up to $25,000. Are you prepared to take that responsibility, Captain? Foster loomed over her, trying to intimidate her. Listen to me very carefully. You are a guest on this aircraft. In fact, you're not even a guest. You're someone I've graciously allowed on board. If you come back here and disturb my passengers again, I'll divert the plane to the nearest airport, have federal police remove you from the plane, and ensure you never fly on a private jet again. Do you understand? The cabin fell silent. Thomas stopped laughing. Richard's cigar stopped halfway to his mouth. Even Lisa, still kneeling with the dustpan, held her breath. Maya looked into Foster's eyes. Captain, you're making a serious mistake. I'm asking you once more. Tell your passengers to put out their tobacco products and comply with FAA regulations. Take your seat. Sit down, said Foster. Each word as sharp as a knife, or I'll have you arrested for obstructing the flight crew." Maya met his gaze for 3 more seconds, then she turned and walked back to the galley. As soon as she was out of sight, she heard Richard's voice. "God, Foster, where did you find her? Is she full of herself?" "I'm sorry, gentlemen," Foster said politely. "Sometimes we get passengers who don't know their place. It won't happen again." "No way," said Thomas. "We're paying good money for this flight. We shouldn't have to deal with flight attendants lecturing us." Maya sat down in her jump seat, took out her phone, and opened the secure communication app. Despite the high altitude, the Gulfstream's advanced satellite system provided a connection. She wrote a message to James Caldwell. "Smoking is occurring in the cabin. The captain approved it despite FAA regulations. There are multiple violations. Prepare termination documents for Foster and submit an incident report to the FAA." The reply came within seconds. "It's already documented with cabin recordings. Foster's license will be reviewed. The legal team is standing by." Maya then opened another application. This one was directly connected to the aircraft's systems. As the owner, she had root access to every function: navigation, communications, environmental controls, and most importantly, the cockpit voice recorder. She opened the recording of the last 30 minutes and listened to Foster's conversation with Richard and Thomas. The part where he clearly gave permission for illegal smoking. The part where he dismissed FAA regulations as negotiable. The part where he threatened to have him arrested for trying to enforce federal law. The evidence was gathered. His career was over. But Maya wasn't done. She needed to understand the depth of Foster's negligence. She stood up and returned to the main cabin. Foster, who was pouring Richard's champagne, saw her coming and turned purple with rage. "I warned you," he began. "I need to use the restroom," Maya calmly interrupted. "Unless, of course, it's reserved for valued customers." Foster's mouth opened and closed. He couldn't stop her from going to the restroom without looking ridiculous. "Fine, use it and return to your seat." Maya walked past the smirking managers and entered the front restroom. Once inside, she locked the door and took out her phone. She dialed a number that connected directly to the FAA Aviation Security Hotline. This system was designed to report security breaches in real time. "FAA Security Hotline, how can I help you?" "This is Dr. Maya Sterling," she said quietly. "I'm reporting a violation on flight November 7 Mike Sierra from Aspen to Teterboro. The captain allowed illegal smoking in the cabin and threatened a passenger who wanted to report the violation." There was a pause. "Can you verify your identity and the aircraft's registration information?" Maya provided identification details only an owner would know and detailed registration information. "Dr. Sterling," the operator said, her tone taking on an urgent professionalism. "We are currently tracking your aircraft. Inspectors will be waiting at Teterboro. Please stay safe and document everything." "I already have," Maya said. "Thank you." She hung up, flushed the toilet for appearances, and returned to the cabin. Foster was waiting, arms crossed. "Finally, get back in your seat, now." Maya walked past him without a word. As she passed in front of Richard's seat, the executive blew cigar smoke in her direction. "Go away, sweetheart," said Richard. "Grown-ups are talking." Maya stopped and looked at him. She said nothing, just stared at him with a very calm, very controlled expression, and Richard's smug smile faltered for a moment. Then she continued to the back and sat down in the jump seat. There were 2 hours until landing. There were 2 hours until these men learned the price of judging someone by their appearance. There were 2 hours until Captain Ryan Foster's world came crashing down. Maya closed her eyes and thought of the words her father had said when she faced bullies at school as a child. "Baby, people who judge you by your appearance are revealing their own weaknesses. Let them underestimate you. Then show them who you really are." "It's time to show them, Dad," she thought. The Gulfstream continued its smooth flight to New York, carrying 3 men who thought they had taken over the world and a woman who was actually the owner of the plane they were in. The descent to Teterboro began with a slight change in cabin pressure, which experienced passengers instinctively noticed. Maya watched from the galley window as the afternoon sun painted the New York skyline in shades of gold and amber. Darkness would fall in 90 minutes. But the real darkness would descend upon Captain Ryan Foster much sooner. In the main cabin, Richard and Thomas had finally put away their cigars, not out of respect for the rules, but because they had run out. The cabin reeked of tobacco smoke, and despite the ventilation system running at maximum capacity, there was still a slight haze in the air. Lisa was desperately spraying cabin air freshener around the cabin, trying to mask the smell. She looked tired and unhappy, glancing apologetically at Maya when Foster wasn't looking. Foster emerged from the cockpit, his uniform jacket on, his captain's cap sitting squarely on his head. "Gentlemen, we will be landing in about 20 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts and return your seats to their upright position." "That was a great flight, Captain," said Richard, shaking Foster's hand and handing him a stack of bills that looked like several $100s. "It was as smooth as silk, and thank you for being flexible with the rules." Foster pocketed the money with his usual smile. "You're welcome, sir. I believe in catering to my passengers' needs. That's what separates private aviation from commercial cattle cars. You're absolutely right, Thomas agreed. We'll definitely request you for our future flights. It would be my pleasure, gentlemen. As Foster returned to the cockpit, Maya pulled out her phone. Despite being in the final approach phase, the Gulfstream satellite system was still connected. She sent one last message to James Caldwell. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes. Are we ready?" The reply came immediately. "The welcoming committee is ready. Port Authority police, FAA inspectors, and our entire legal team. Foster has no idea what's waiting for him." Maya allowed herself a small, cold smile. The landing was smooth. Foster was an excellent pilot, which made the flaws in his character all the more disappointing. As the Gulfstream taxied off the runway, Maya noticed they weren't heading for the main FBO terminal. Instead, they were being directed to a remote hangar area, away from the main traffic. She could see why from the window. 5 black SUVs were parked in a half-circle, their headlights cutting through the darkness. At least a dozen people were waiting, their breath visible in the cold December air. In the cockpit, Foster's voice came over the intercom, sounding slightly tense. "Gentlemen, there's been a small change. We're being directed to Hangar 7 to park. It will only take a few more minutes to disembark." Richard frowned. "What's going on? Our cars are waiting at the main terminal." "I'm not sure, sir. Let me check with ground control." But Maya knew exactly what was happening, and in about 30 seconds Captain Foster would too. The Gulfstream came to a stop. The engines slowed, their high-pitched whine fading into silence. For a moment the only sound was the wind rushing against the fuselage. Then Foster's voice, no longer calm, crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. We are experiencing an administrative delay." Maya watched James Caldwell step forward from the group by the jump seat through the small window. Even from a distance she could see his expression, professionally neutral, but his eyes were as hard as diamonds. Foster entered the cabin, his confident air gone. He looked pale and uncertain. "Mr. Cole, Mr. Webb, I apologize for the inconvenience. It seems there's some kind of inspection requirement. Probably routine." "Inspection?" Thomas said irritably. "We don't have time for that. We have a dinner reservation at Per Se in 90 minutes. "I understand, sir. Allow me to speak with the cabin door opened from the outside. Someone had used ground crew access." James Caldwell descended the air stairs and entered the cabin, followed by 2 Port Authority police officers. "Captain Foster," James said, his voice echoing in the cabin with an icy sharpness. "Please step outside." Foster's face turned gray with pallor. "Mr. Caldwell, I can explain. Out, now." Richard stood up, his executive instincts kicking in. "What's going on here? Do you know who I am? I'm Richard Cole, Vice President." "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Cole." James cut him off. "And you'll be speaking with FAA inspectors shortly about your decision to smoke on a commercial aircraft in violation of federal regulations." The cabin fell silent. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. Thomas looked as if he wanted to disappear into his leather seat. Foster tried again. "Mr. Caldwell, this is a misunderstanding." "Captain Foster," said one of the police officers, stepping forward, "you need to get off the plane. There are federal inspectors who want to talk to you." Foster looked around helplessly, as if searching for an escape route. His eyes fell on Maya, still sitting silently in the jump seat at the back of the cabin. "It's her fault," Foster said suddenly, pointing at Maya. "This woman has been disruptive throughout the entire flight. She harassed my passengers, refused to comply with the crew's instructions." "Captain," James said quietly, dangerously, "I strongly advise you to stop talking." But Foster was now in full panic mode. "No, you don't understand. She's been causing trouble from the start. She tried to sit in an unauthorized passenger seat. Sterling, would you like to step forward?" Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She walked slowly through the cabin, past the stunned executives and the horrified Lisa, and came to stand in front of Captain Ryan Foster. "Hello, Captain," she said calmly. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Dr. Maya Sterling, CEO of Biogen Innovations, and owner of this Gulfstream G650. The color drained completely from Foster's face. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Richard Cole's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. It was the second glass to break during the flight. You're Maya Sterling?" "Correct," Maya said, never taking her eyes off Foster. "The woman you discussed buying or destroying your company. The woman you wanted to steal the patent portfolio from. I sat in the back and listened to your entire conversation." Thomas made a gurgling sound. Richard looked like he was going to vomit. Maya focused all her attention on Foster. "Captain, when I boarded this plane in Aspen, you thought I was catering staff. Then you thought I was ground crew. Then you reluctantly accepted that I was a passenger, but you seated me in the jump seat because I didn't fit your image of someone who belonged in first class. Dr. Sterling, I didn't know." "You didn't need to know who I was." Maya cut him off, her voice as cold as the December air outside. "You were required to treat every passenger with basic dignity and respect. You were required to follow FAA regulations instead of accepting bribes to allow your passengers to break federal law. You had to be professional, not fanatical. Foster's hands were shaking. Please, I have a family. I've been flying for 20 years. And in 20 years you never learned that character is more important than appearance. Maya turned to James. I want him off my plane, now. James nodded to the police officers. Captain Foster, these officers will take you to the terminal where FAA inspectors are waiting to question you. I need to take your company ID, your aircraft keys, and your captain's badge. You can't fire me, Foster said helplessly. I have a contract. I have rights. You violated numerous federal regulations, James said flatly. You allowed illegal smoking on the plane. You accepted a bribe to ignore these regulations. And worst of all, you discriminated against a passenger because of his race and appearance. Your contract has a just cause termination clause. That clause will be invoked immediately. One of the officers stepped forward. Sir, if you come with us voluntarily, this will be much less of a problem. Foster's shoulders slumped. He looked at Maya once more, and Maya saw a change in his eyes. Panic had given way to bitter resentment. It's because I'm white, isn't it? You're playing the race card to ruin my career. No, Captain, Maya said, her voice as sharp as a scalpel. It's because you're a bigot who judges people by the color of their skin and the clothes they wear. It's because you violated federal law. It's because you're not fit to command an aircraft. Your race has nothing to do with your failures. They are entirely your own. Foster opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. The officers directed him toward the door. As Foster descended the stairs, Maya heard him say to one of the officers, "You don't understand. I thought he was insignificant. How could I have known?" The officer's reply was barely audible. "Perhaps you should treat everyone as if they are important, sir." Maya turned to Richard and Thomas, who were trying to make themselves small in their seats. "Gentlemen, I thought you wanted to form a partnership with Biogen Innovations." "Dr. Sterling," Richard stammered, "we didn't know the things we said." "You didn't know I was listening," Maya corrected. "But you still said them. You discussed buying or destroying my company. You called me that Sterling woman. You treated my employee like a servant. And you violated federal law by smoking on my plane." "We'll pay for any damages," Thomas said quickly. "Cleaning costs, repairs, whatever it takes. You'll pay much more than that," Maya said. "You'll pay the FAA's fines, starting at $25,000 per violation. You'll pay approximately $200,000 for the complete repair of this cabin's interior. And you will never contact Biogen Innovations again." She pointed to the door. "Your cars are waiting at the main terminal. I suggest you start walking. It's about half a mile away. The exercise will do you good." "In this cold?" Richard protested. "We're wearing suits. You should have thought about that before I turned my plane into a cigar lounge," Maya said. "Now get off my plane." The two executives gathered their belongings and hurried toward the exit without looking back. Lisa stood by the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "Dr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have done something." Maya turned to her, her expression softening. "Lisa, you were following your boss's orders. I understand that. But I need to know, if you had known who I was from the beginning, would you have treated me differently?" Lisa swallowed hard. Yes, I would have treated you differently, and I'm ashamed of that." Maya nodded. "At least you're honest. That's something." She turned to James. "I want Lisa to be retrained. Not fired, retrained. Every passenger deserves the same level of service, regardless of their appearance or what we know about them." "Absolutely," said James. Maya looked at Lisa. "And then I want to assign you to my fleet. You'll be trained to our standards and help train others. Can you do that?" Lisa's eyes widened. You're not firing me, are you? You're young. You made mistakes because you followed a toxic leader. But you can learn. Will you learn?" "Yes," Lisa said enthusiastically. "Yes, Dr. Sterling. I promise." "Good." Maya walked toward the exit, then paused. "Oh, and Lisa, when you retrain the other crew members, use today as a case study. Make sure they understand what happens when you judge passengers by their appearance instead of treating everyone with respect." "I will, Dr. Sterling. Thank you." Maya stepped out into the cold New Jersey evening. The plane Foster had tried to block her access to glowed in the hangar lights, the plane she had bought with her own money, designed to her own specifications. James walked beside her toward his SUV. "The FAA inspectors want an explanation from you. They're considering suspending Foster's license until a full investigation is complete." "Fine," Maya said. "Until they learn that prejudice has no place in the cockpit. He shouldn't fly any aircraft, private or commercial." "There's something else," James said carefully. "Foster's wife called. She's pregnant, due in 3 months. She was crying, begging for leniency." Maya stopped walking. She thought about the expression on her face when she realized who Foster was. She thought about his words. "I thought he was insignificant." His wife didn't discriminate against me, Maya said finally. His wife didn't violate federal regulations. His wife didn't judge me by my clothes. He did. He's the one who has to live with the consequences, not his wife. I understand, James said. Whatever happens, I'm sorry about what happened. I hired Foster based on his flight logs. I never thought he would do something like this. You couldn't have known, Maya said. That's why I sometimes fly incognito. To see how people behave when they think no one important is watching. It reveals their character. They reached the SUV. Before getting in, Maya looked back at the Gulf Stream. How long will it take to repair the cabin? 3 to 4 weeks, said James. A complete detailed cleaning of the interior, new air filtration, replacement of damaged wood. The silk panels will need to be completely replaced. The smoke damage is permanent. We'll pay Bill Richard Cole and Thomas Webb every penny, Maya said. And when the job is done, I want Lisa's first assignment to be a training flight. She needs to understand what this plane is supposed to be, a place where everyone is respected, regardless of appearance. James smiled. You're giving her a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance, Maya said. Even Lisa. But not Foster. He had 20 years to learn these lessons. He chose not to. As they walked away from the hangar, Maya pulled out her phone. There were dozens of messages from her management team, board members and colleagues in the aviation industry who had heard about the incident. But one message stood out. It was from her mother. Baby, I heard about what happened. Are you okay? Maya replied, I'm fine, Mom. I'm teaching some people that judgment comes at a price. Her mother's reply came immediately. Your father would be proud of you. Show them what you're made of, baby. Maya smiled and looked out the window at the New York lights spreading into the darkness. Tomorrow, this story would spread through the private aviation world. Other pilots would hear about Captain Foster's downfall. Other passengers would think twice before treating crew members badly. Other managers would remember that assumptions based on appearances could be costly. But tonight, Maya just wanted to go home. Tomorrow, she would fly another plane with a crew who already knew who she was and showed every passenger the respect they deserved. Because that's what professionals did. And Maya Sterling only worked with professionals. 3 months later, Ryan Foster sat in a vinyl booth at a truck stop outside Wichita, Kansas, sipping his third cup of burnt coffee. The sun hadn't risen yet, but he'd been awake since 2 a.m., preparing for an overnight cargo flight in an old Cessna Caravan that would take him from Kansas to Louisville. This was what his life had become. The fall had been swift and brutal. Within 48 hours of the Teterboro incident, every major aviation management company in the country had blacklisted him. The FAA had suspended his license for 90 days pending investigation. When they returned his license, a permanent stain had been added to his record, 14 CFR 121.317, violation of smoking regulations, and violation of company standards, discriminatory behavior. These marks meant the end of his career in private aviation. No executive jet company wanted to work with him. No corporate flight department would interview him. The message was clear. Ryan Foster had violated the unwritten rules of private aviation, and the industry had united against him. He spent the first month in denial, certain that a single incident would overshadow his 20 years of experience. He reached out to every connection in his network, every pilot he'd flown with, every charter company he'd worked for. The responses were variations on the same theme. I'm sorry, Ryan. I can't help you. Some were more honest. Greg Patterson, a captain friend he'd known for 15 years, had at least told him the truth over a beer. Buddy, you picked the wrong passenger to mess with. Maya Sterling sits on 3 aviation safety boards. Her husband is the chief counsel for the National Business Aviation Association. You're radioactive. Every company in the industry has taken note. Putting me on a blacklist, Foster protested. That's illegal. No, Greg corrected. These are the consequences. You subjected a passenger to discrimination, took bribes to ignore federal regulations, and threatened to have him arrested for trying to enforce the law. They don't need to blacklist you, Ryan. Your own actions did that. By the second month, Foster had lowered his standards. He applied to regional airlines, corporate charter services, even flight schools. He got no results. The aviation world was smaller than people thought, and news traveled fast. In the third month, he had to accept the only job available, night cargo flights for Midwest Express Freight. This company was barely staying afloat, operating old Cessna Caravan planes that carried mail, auto parts, and sometimes frozen food. His annual salary was $45,000. It was less than a quarter of what he earned flying Gulfstreams. And the job was tough. Night flights in bad weather, minimal maintenance, no co-pilot, no flight attendant, no luxuries. Just Ryan Foster, alone in the cockpit, smelling of engine oil and desperation. His phone rang. A message from his wife Jennifer. The baby woke up. She won't stop crying. Where are you? Foster's jaw tightened. Jennifer had given birth to their daughter Emma 6 weeks earlier. The timing couldn't have been worse. He had no job, no health insurance, and a constantly crying newborn. He typed a reply. I'm in Kansas. The flight was delayed. I'll be home by noon. It was a lie. The cargo plane wouldn't take off until 6 a.m., and with stops in 3 cities, he wouldn't be home until at least 3 p.m. But Jennifer was already at her limit. He couldn't put her through any more stress. Another message arrived. The hospital bill came. The insurance company denied the claim because you were terminated for just cause. Foster closed her eyes. Terminated for just cause. The phrase wouldn't leave her mind. It meant her insurance was retroactively canceled. This meant the severance package he had hoped for was now invalid. This meant Jennifer's prenatal care, Emma's birth, all the postnatal checkups. All of it was now their responsibility. I'll figure something out, he replied. Another lie. He had no idea how someone earning $45,000 a year was supposed to pay $47,000. My mom says we need to declare bankruptcy, Jennifer replied. I'm starting to think she's right. Foster didn't respond. He couldn't. Bankruptcy, the thought of losing everything because of one flight, one decision, one passenger. It was too much. His coffee had gone cold. He pushed the cup aside and looked out the window into the darkness before dawn. Somewhere in that darkness was the life he used to have, the Gulf Stream, the executive passengers, the respect, the 6-figure salary. It was all gone because he had looked at a woman wearing a North Face jacket and decided she didn't belong here. At 5:30 a.m., Foster walked across the frozen tarmac toward the Cessna Caravan. The plane was old, at least 30 years old, and it showed. There were dents in the fuselage, patches on the wings, rust around the door hinges. The company's maintenance standards were, at best, minimal. A cargo handler, a boy named Danny who couldn't have been more than 20, was loading boxes through the rear cargo door. The plane is all yours, Captain, Danny said, tying the last strap. We're fully loaded tonight. Mail, auto parts, and 3 pallets of frozen chicken parts going to Louisville. Foster nodded and climbed into the cockpit. The interior was a stark contrast to the Gulfstream's leather and mahogany trim, cracked plastic panels, faded instruments, a seat that had lost its padding years ago. He mechanically went through the pre-flight checklist, his mind elsewhere. He was thinking about Maya Sterling. He thought about how she had looked at him just before he was taken off the plane. She wasn't angry, she wasn't triumphant, she was just disappointed. For some reason that was worse than anger. The flight to Louisville suddenly became anything but routine. 2 hours later, flying through thick clouds over Missouri, the right engine began to make a grinding noise. Foster checked the gauges. Oil pressure was dropping, temperature was rising. Midwest Operations Center, Caravan 23, he reported over the radio. Engine trouble on the right side. Request priority route to the nearest suitable airport. Copy that, Caravan 23. Springfield is 40 miles northeast. Can you make it? Foster glanced at the gauges again. The engine was still running but barely. Affirmative, declaring an emergency. 10 minutes later, he landed the Cessna hard on Springfield's runway, the damaged engine continuing to sputter and smoke. Fire trucks were already waiting. When Foster exited the cockpit, the chief mechanic was already shaking his head. The engine is done. It needs to be completely rebuilt. How long will that take? Foster already knew the answer would be bad. A week, maybe 2. That's if we can find the parts. Foster pulled out his phone and called his supervisor. Rick, it's Foster. I'm stuck in Springfield due to engine failure. Damn it, Ryan, that was our only Caravan flight heading east tonight. You're screwing me over. The engine failure isn't my fault. This plane should have been retired years ago. Welcome to Budget Cargo, buddy. Listen, you'll have to fly back to Wichita on a commercial flight. I'm docking your pay for the missed flight. Foster gripped the phone tightly. You can't dock my pay for a mechanical failure. Read your contract, Foster. You get paid per completed flight. If the flight isn't completed, there's no pay. The line went dead. Foster stood on the cold Springfield tarmac, watching the mechanics mill around the damaged Cessna, feeling the full weight of his new reality. This was his life now. Broken engines, pay deductions, no respect, no second chances, all because Maya Sterling treated him like he was nobody. 6 months after the incident, Foster was loading his cargo boxes of medical supplies into a rented minivan. He'd been fired from Midwest Express after 3 equipment failures that weren't his fault, but still hurt his reliability rating. Now he was providing medical courier services on the same day, transporting packages between hospitals and clinics in the Kansas City area. It wasn't flying, it was barely transportation. But it paid $15 an hour, and he needed every penny. His phone rang. Jennifer. He almost didn't answer, but guilt made him pick up. Ryan, where are you? Emma has a pediatrician appointment in an hour. I'm working, Jen. I can't. You're always working. And we're still broke. Her voice cracked. The landlord sent us an eviction notice. We owe 3 months' rent. What are we going to do? Foster closed his eyes and leaned against the minivan. I'll figure something out. You always say that, but you never do. Jennifer was crying now. Maybe my mom was right. Maybe I should go back to Ohio. At least there would be someone to help Emma there. Don't, said Foster, panic beginning to show in his voice. Please, Jen, give me a little more time. Time for what, Ryan? Another miracle job that doesn't exist? Every airline in the country knows what you did. No one will hire you. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Jennifer cut him off. You chose to judge someone by their appearance. You chose to let passengers break the law. You chose to threaten a woman who turned out to be the plane's owner. Those weren't mistakes, Ryan. Those were choices, and now we're paying the price. She hung up. Foster stood in the medical supply depot's parking lot, his breath visible in the February cold, and realized Jennifer was right. These weren't mistakes. Mistakes were accidents. Things that happened despite your best efforts. What they did to Maya Sterling was intentional. He had looked at her clothes, her appearance, and decided she didn't deserve respect. He had created a hierarchy in his mind where some passengers were important and others were insignificant. And when that hierarchy was questioned, instead of correcting his course, he had hardened his stance. This wasn't a mistake. This was character, or lack thereof. A year after the incident, Foster was attending a mandatory job search seminar at the Kansas Unemployment Office. 24 people sat around him. Laid-off factory workers, former retail managers, unemployed IT specialists. The seminar's moderator, Sharon, a well-meaning woman, had them do a reshape your story exercise. Sharon explained, the goal is to present your unemployment or layoff situation in a positive light. Focus on what you learned, how you grew. Foster raised his hand. What if you were fired for something you can't present positively? Sharon smiled encouragingly. There's always a way to reframe it. What was the reason for your layoff? Discriminatory behavior in violation of federal aviation regulations. The room fell silent. Sharon's smile faded. I understand. That's definitely a tough situation. But even in tough situations, there's potential for growth. What did you learn from this experience? Foster opened his mouth to give her the answer she wanted. Diversity training, sensitivity, learning from mistakes, things like that. But instead, the truth came out. I learned that the aviation industry is unforgiving. I learned that one bad decision can ruin 20 years of good work. And I learned that being sorry for getting caught has nothing to do with apologizing. Sharon looked uncomfortable. So you're saying your perspective on what happened hasn't actually changed? Foster thought of Maya Sterling. He thought of her sitting in that jump seat for 4 hours, silently documenting everything while Foster treated her like dirt. He thought of her trying to stop him from smoking illegally, and Foster threatening to have her arrested. He thought of her giving Lisa a second chance, but not him. I've changed, he said slowly. But it's not because I suddenly saw the light. I changed because I lost everything, and I'm afraid of losing more. Is that the kind of progress you're looking for? Sharon couldn't answer that. After the seminar, Foster walked to his car. A 15-year-old Honda Civic he'd bought for $2,000 after his Porsche was repossessed. His phone vibrated with a news alert. The headline made his stomach churn. Biogen Innovations announces new aviation security initiative, Sterling Protocol. He clicked on the article. There was a photo of Maya Sterling on the podium, looking professional and calm in her tailored suit. The article explained that she had partnered with several aviation organizations to create a comprehensive anti-discrimination training program for private aviation crews. The program was named after her. It would be mandatory for all private aviation personnel. And it used real case studies, including her own case, as Foster realized with horror. She scrolled down and found Maya's words. The Sterling Protocol isn't about punishment, it's about education. Too many aviation professionals make assumptions based on appearance instead of treating every passenger with equal respect. We will change this culture, one crew member at a time. There was a footnote at the bottom of the article. The first case study addresses an incident last December 24th where a captain subjected a passenger, who turned out to be the aircraft owner, to discrimination. The captain's identity has been anonymized in the training materials, but this incident is a clear example of how prejudice can jeopardize both safety and career. Anonymized. They had been merciful enough not to reveal his name to the public in the training materials, but everyone in the industry would know. They would hear the story that the captain had removed the plane's owner from his seat, and they would know it was Ryan Foster. He would be immortalized as a cautionary tale. Every new flight attendant, every pilot candidate, every aviation professional would hear his story and learn what not to do. His legacy would not be 20 years of safe flying. It would be a single flight that revealed his character and found it wanting. Foster sat in his car in the unemployment office parking lot and cried for the first time since childhood. They weren't tears of self-pity, though there were plenty of those too. They were tears of bitterly accepting that this was his own fault. Maya Sterling hadn't ruined his career. He had. Maya had simply refused to overlook his behavior. And now, for the rest of his life, pilots would learn from his failure. They would sit in classrooms and listen to the captain who judged a passenger by his coat rather than his character. The captain who valued rich men's tips more than federal regulations. The captain who believed his position gave him the right to decide who deserved respect. They would hear this story and learn not to make the same mistakes. Ryan Foster had wanted to be a legend in aviation. He had achieved that, but not in the way he had imagined. He had become legendary, yes. As an example of everything a captain should never be. 18 months after the incident, Maya Sterling stood in a state-of-the-art flight training facility in White Plains, New York. The room was designed like a luxury aircraft cabin, leather seats, polished wood, soft lighting. But instead of passengers, it was filled with 50 aviation professionals, pilots, flight attendants, operations managers. They were the first group to complete the Sterling Protocol training program. Maya wasn't scheduled to speak today. She preferred to leave the training to the professionals. But James Caldwell had asked her to give a short speech to put a face to the initiative. Standing at the back of the room, she listened as lead instructor Patricia Moore, a former FAA inspector, presented a case study to the group. The passenger boards the plane in casual attire, Patricia said, showing photos on the screen. The photos deliberately did not show faces. The captain makes an assumption based on appearance. He directs the passenger to a lower quality seat. He ignores the passenger's concerns about safety violations. At what point could this situation have been prevented? A young pilot raised his hand. The captain should have treated all passengers equally from the outset. Appearance does not determine who deserves respect. Exactly, said Patricia. But let's dig deeper. Why did the captain make these assumptions? What was he actually protecting? A flight attendant spoke up. His own idea of how the cabin should look. He was protecting aesthetics rather than providing service. Good. So what was the cost of that decision? His career, said one. The passenger turned out to be the owner of the company. Correct, Patricia agreed. But even if the passenger hadn't been the company owner, the captain's behavior was still wrong. Discrimination is wrong, no matter who the victim is. The fact that the outcome only occurred because of the passenger's power is the real lesson here. We cannot rely on passengers' power to fulfill our responsibilities. We must hold ourselves accountable. Maya felt a great sense of satisfaction. This was exactly the message she had hoped the training would convey. The issue wasn't about punishing Ryan Foster. The issue was about changing the culture that had allowed Foster's behavior to continue for years. After the session ended, several participants approached Maya. A young black woman in her mid-20s, wearing a crisp pilot's uniform, stepped forward nervously. "Dr. Sterling, I'm Captain Jasmine Robinson. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" Maya asked. "For the Sterling Protocol. I've been flying corporate jets for 2 years, and I can't count how many times I've been mistaken for a flight attendant or had my qualifications questioned. Your training is the first time I've seen an aviation company take discrimination seriously." Maya smiled. "You shouldn't have to deal with that. But I'm glad the training made a difference." Another pilot, an older white man, approached. "Dr. Sterling, I'm Captain Mike Henderson. I've been in aviation for 30 years. I'll be honest, when I first heard about this training I thought it was more politically correct nonsense. But after reviewing the case studies, I realized I made the same mistakes as the captain in your case. Not to the same extreme, but the same basic assumptions. It was an eye-opener for me. That's what I was hoping for," Maya said. "Awareness is the first step toward change." As the crowd dispersed, James Caldwell approached with a tablet. "I want to show you something. We obtained 6 months of data from airlines implementing the Sterling Protocol." He opened a dashboard showing statistics from 20 aviation companies. Discrimination complaints decreased by 64% at participating companies. Employee satisfaction increased by 41%. Passenger satisfaction scores rose by an average of 28 points. Maya studied the numbers. "This is significant. This is revolutionary," James corrected. "You've changed an entire industry's approach to passenger service. The NBAA is considering making the Sterling Protocol mandatory for all member companies." Maya slowly nodded. "Good. But James, I want to make one thing clear. This isn't about my ego or my brand. If another organization wants to take this training and develop it, expand it, make it their own, that's fine with me. The goal is cultural change, not praise." "I know," said James. "That's why people respect what you're doing. You're not trying to profit from your own discrimination. You're trying to prevent others from doing the same." Maya's phone vibrated. A message had come from Lisa, a former flight attendant who was now director of passenger services training at Maya's Airline. "Boss, the new hires completed the Sterling Protocol training. They all passed. We're creating the culture you want." Maya replied, "I'm proud of you, Lisa. Keep up the excellent work." She thought about the journey from that cold December day in Aspen to this moment. The humiliation of being fired from her own plane and sent to the jump seat. The anger of watching Foster take bribes to ignore federal law. the satisfaction of seeing the look on Foster's face when he realized who she was. But more importantly, she thought of all the people who faced similar treatment without the resources she had. Countless passengers profiled, fired, or humiliated because of their appearance with no power to fight back. That was the real issue. Not revenge, but justice. Not just for herself, but for everyone told they didn't belong. 2 years after the incident, Maya received an unexpected letter. The letter arrived at her office in a plain envelope with a Kansas City postmark. The sender's address was unfamiliar. She carefully opened the letter. Inside was a handwritten note on cheap paper. "Dear Dr. Sterling, you don't know me, but my name is Jennifer Foster. I am the wife of Ryan Foster, the pilot who discriminated against you on your flight 2 years ago. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness or to excuse my husband. What he did was wrong, and he knows it. We lost almost everything: our home, our savings, our health insurance. We went bankrupt last year. Ryan is now working as a delivery driver. He will never fly professionally again. I am writing this letter because our daughter Emma is now 18 months old. I don't want her to grow up thinking what her father did is acceptable. I don't want her to learn his prejudices. Ryan has spent the last 2 years in therapy trying to overcome his prejudices. He has volunteered with civil rights organizations. He has tried to make amends, but I know nothing can take back what he did. I don't expect you to care about any of this. You are absolutely right to hate him. But I wanted you to know that your decision to defend yourself not only ended his career, but also prevented my daughter from being raised by a man who judges people by their appearance. Thank you for that, and I apologize for what he put you through. Jennifer Foster." Maya read the letter 3 times. She was in a complex emotional state. She felt sympathy for Jennifer and Emma, who were paying the price for Ryan's choices. She was skeptical about whether Foster had truly changed or was just sorry because he got caught. And a deeper question: what, if anything, did she owe this family? She took out her personal stationery and began to write. "Dear Jennifer, thank you for your letter. I can only imagine how difficult the last 2 years have been for you and your daughter. Let me be clear. I don't hate your husband. I never have. I was disappointed by his actions, angry at his assumptions, and determined to hold him accountable. But hatred requires more emotional energy than I want to expend on someone whose character is so clearly revealed. What Ryan did was not a temporary mistake. It was a pattern of behavior, judging passengers by their appearance, taking bribes to ignore federal regulations, using his authority to intimidate those he perceived as weak. These behaviors had to have consequences. I was glad to hear he's in therapy and trying to correct his biases. That's important work, and I hope he continues. But I want you to understand, I didn't ruin his career. He did that himself. I simply refused to support his behavior. As for Emma, she deserves to grow up in a world where people are judged by their character, not their appearance. I hope Ryan teaches her this lesson not through what happened to her, but through the person he becomes. If Ryan is truly committed to change, he has an opportunity to make a difference. He could speak at Sterling Protocol trainings, sharing his perspective as someone who failed. He could work with young pilots, helping them understand the cost of prejudice. He could use his experiences to prevent others from making the same mistakes. That would be real responsibility. That would be growth. I wish you and Emma happiness. The consequences of Ryan's actions should not determine your life, only his. Dr. Maya Sterling. She sealed and sent the letter. She didn't expect a reply, nor did she need one. This message was as much for herself as it was for Jennifer. Responsibility does not require cruelty, and justice does not mean denying the humanity of those who have wronged you. 3 years after the incident, Maya was invited to speak at the International Aviation Safety Summit in Geneva. Topic: Creating Equitable Safety Cultures in Aviation. The hall was filled with over 2,000 aviation professionals from around the world. When Maya took the stage, she saw people of all ages, genders, and ethnicities. It reflected the slow but steady transformation of the industry. 3 years ago, Maya began, I boarded my own plane in my everyday clothes. The captain looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong there. He judged me by my appearance, not my ticket. He sat me in a jump seat on my own plane. And when I tried to enforce federal safety rules, he threatened to have me arrested. The audience listened quietly, attentively. That captain lost his career, but he wasn't the problem, he was just a symptom. The problem was the culture that taught him some passengers were more important than others. Appearance determines value. Authority gives the right to judge who deserves respect. Maya paused to let her words sink in. The Sterling Protocol wasn't created to punish that captain. It was created to change the culture that produced him. And in the 3 years since we implemented the protocol, I've seen real change. Airlines are hiring more diverse crews. Training programs explicitly address biases. Passengers generally report being treated better. She moved to the next slide, showing data from hundreds of airlines. But our work isn't done. Prejudices still exist, discrimination still persists, and often this issue is only addressed when the victim has power, when they own the plane, when they have the resources to fight back. Maya leaned forward, her voice intensifying. True equality means every passenger receives the same dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or status. It means the captain treats the woman in the North Face jacket the same as the executive in a suit. It means our commitment to safety and service isn't contingent on who we think is watching us. Applause began and turned into a standing ovation. Maya stood on the podium, not reveling in the praise, thinking of all the people who faced discrimination without having her platform. This was for them. It was for all of them. After the speech, a young man in a pilot's uniform approached Maya. He looked tense. "Dr. Sterling? I'm First Officer Marcus Chen. I was on the crew that day, Captain Foster's first officer. I didn't say anything. I saw him treat you badly, and I stayed silent." Maya studied him. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I learned the wrong lesson at first," Marcus confessed. "I thought the lesson was don't discriminate against people who might be powerful. But the Sterling Protocol training made me realize the real lesson is don't discriminate, period. No matter who it is." "Exactly," Maya said. "So what are you doing differently now?" "I'm speaking up," Marcus said. "When I see the crew making assumptions about passengers, I challenge them. When I see prejudice, I report it. And I've started mentoring young pilots, helping them navigate an industry where they aren't always welcome." Maya smiled. "That's how we change the culture. One, by raising our voices, by doing better." Marcus nodded. "I wanted to thank you, not just for what you did, but for how you did it. You could have destroyed everyone involved, but instead of personal revenge, you brought about systemic change. That's real leadership." As Marcus walked away, James Caldwell approached. "Someone wants to talk to you. I told him I'd ask you first." "Who?" Maya asked. James hesitated. "Ryan Foster." Maya's breath caught. "He's here?" "He's attending the summit. Volunteering at the Sterling Protocol booth, sharing his story with attendees. He asked if he could speak with you briefly. I told him I would ask you, but also that you had no obligation." Maya thought about Jennifer's letter. She thought about the data showing cultural change. She thought about Marcus Chen learning from Foster's mistakes. 5 minutes, she said, in a public place. 10 minutes later, Maya stood in a quiet corner of the conference hall, watching Ryan Foster approach. He looked different, older, thinner, worn down by life. He wore a simple badge identifying him as a Sterling Protocol volunteer. "Dr. Sterling," she said, her voice hushed. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "You have 5 minutes, Maya said. "Use them wisely." Foster nodded. "I didn't come here to apologize or make excuses. I came here to tell you that you were right about everything. I judged you by your appearance. I abused my authority. I violated federal regulations. And I did it because I thought I could get away with it." "I know," said Maya. "I was there. It took me 3 years to understand why I did these things." Foster continued. "Therapy, soul-searching, working with civil rights organizations. And the truth is, I was raised in a system that rewarded prejudice. That system taught me to profile passengers, to see wealthy customers as more valuable than others, to believe my position gave me the right to judge people. That's an explanation, not an excuse," Maya said. "I know. That's why I'm here, volunteering. I tell young pilots my story. I show them what happens when you let prejudice influence your decisions. I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can prevent others from making the same mistakes." Maya studied him. "Are you doing this because you've truly changed, or to fix your career?" Foster looked into her eyes. "To be honest, I started for the second reason. I thought that if I paid enough penance, someone might give me another chance. But at some point it became real. I'll never fly professionally again. I've accepted that. But I can use my failure to teach others. That's my contribution now." Maya shook her head slowly. "The Sterling Protocol isn't about destroying people, Captain Foster. It's about holding people accountable while also creating opportunities for growth. If you're truly committed to this work, continue. Not for atonement, but because it's right." "I will continue," said Foster. "And Dr. Sterling? I'm sorry, not for getting caught, but for who I was that day. I'm sorry for being so preoccupied with protecting my ego that I failed to see your humanity." Maya looked at him for a long time. "Your apology is accepted. Now prove you've changed by helping others avoid your mistakes." Foster nodded and walked away. James approached. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Maya admitted. "But hopeful. If Foster can change, anyone can. And if his story prevents even one pilot from making the same mistakes, we will have gained something from that terrible flight." 5 years after the incident, Maya stood in her refurbished Gulfstream, the very same aircraft where it all happened. The cabin had been completely restored after the smoke damage, but Maya had made one change. She had a small plaque installed next to the main cabin entrance. The plaque read, Everyone who boards this aircraft, regardless of appearance, status, or background, deserves dignity and respect. Treat all passengers as you would like to be treated. Dr. M. Sterling. Lisa, now Director of Aviation Services, stood beside her. The new crew is ready for their first flights, Dr. Sterling. They all completed the Sterling Protocol training with excellent marks. Good, said Maya. And they understand that it's not just about following the rules, right? That it's about truly seeing every passenger as deserving of respect. They do, Lisa assured her. We make sure of it. Every person hired goes through rigorous training, and we test not just their technical skills but their character as well. Maya smiled. You've come a long way, Lisa. So has the industry, Lisa replied. Thanks to you. Maya shook her head. Not because of me. Because of everyone who decided change was necessary. I just refused to accept mistreatment. The real heroes are people like you who seized that moment and built something better. As Maya prepared to board the plane to London, sitting in her assigned 3A seat, she thought about the journey from that cold December day in Aspen to this moment. She had been rejected, humiliated, and discriminated against. But she had refused to accept it. She had stood firm, documented everything, and demanded accountability. And in doing so, she had changed an industry. The Sterling Protocol had become standard training in over 200 airlines worldwide. Discrimination complaints had decreased by 70% in participating airlines. Crew diversity had increased by 45%. And countless passengers who would have been mistreated were now treated with respect. That was the real victory. Not to ruin Ryan Foster's career, but to build a system where the next person who boards a plane in casual clothes won't face the same prejudices and judgments. As the Gulf Stream ascended into the sky, Maya looked out the window at the clouds and thought once more about her father's words. Let them underestimate you. Then show them who you really are. She had shown them, and by showing them she had changed the meaning of who you really are in the aviation industry. It didn't mean clothes, appearance, or status. It meant character, honesty, your commitment to treating others with respect. That was the lesson of the Sterling Protocol. That was Ryan Foster's legacy, whether he wanted it or not. And that was the future Maya Sterling had built. A flight, a training session, a shift in perspective. The woman in the North Face jacket had boarded the plane and been told she didn't belong here. Now, she was certain no one would ever hear such a thing again.